Well, that's interesting because there was no ones. We met on the road with our respective bands in 1966. I have that kind of discipline when I play the piano. I just play those songs as I play them. Especially in this film because there's some songs that the audience might not really have heard unless they're hardcore ABBA fans.
For years, fans could only speculate until Benny Andersson finally revealed the truth behind ABBA's breakup. He and Frida were once seen as the perfect couple, adored by millions, but behind closed doors, their reality was far from perfect. In a rare interview, Benny uncovers what truly led to their split. Was it the pressures of fame? What was the breaking point? Join us as we expose the awful truth. Benny Andersson confirmed that love turned sour back in the 1970s when ABBA was taking over the pop music scene. Benny Andersson and Annifrid Frida Lyngstad looked like the perfect couple. Their love story unfolded right alongside their rise to fame, much like their bandmates Bjorn and Agnetha. But behind the glittery outfits and hit songs, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Trouble was quietly building, and eventually it would pull them apart. Benny and Frida first met in 1969, long before ABBA was even a thing. At the time, Frida was making a name for herself in Sweden's folk music scene, and Benny, already famous with his band the Hep Stars, Sweden's version of the Beatles, noticed her at a music festival. There was something about her, the fiery red hair and the powerhouse voice, that immediately caught his attention. The spark was instant. ABBA fans had long dreamed of a reunion, and tonight, that dream finally came true. After 35 years, the band was back together. But back in 1975, Frida told a Swedish magazine that meeting Benny just felt right. He understood her love for music in a way no one else ever had. For Benny, it wasn't just about her talent. There was something different about Frida, her independence, her raw energy. She wasn't like anyone he had worked with before. As ABBA took shape, so did Benny and Frida's relationship. While Bjorn and Agnetha were more in the spotlight as a couple, Benny and Frida were busy behind the scenes, fine-tuning the music. Benny had a gift for creating melodies, and Frida had a way of pouring pure emotion into every note she sang. Together, they helped shape the sound that would make ABBA legendary. But fame came at a cost. As ABBA exploded in the mid-1970s, the pressure started to take its toll. Benny, a perfectionist, spent endless hours in the studio, obsessing over every detail. His meticulous approach to songwriting didn't always sit well with Frida, who was more spontaneous and led by emotion. The very differences that once made them a great team slowly began to drive them apart. Their struggles weren't just about music. Fame itself became a problem. Benny liked to keep a low profile when he wasn't on stage, while Frida enjoyed the social side of being a celebrity. Friends started noticing the tension between them, especially during ABBA's world tours. Even their creative spark, the thing that once brought them together, began to fade. By 1979, the cracks in their relationship were too big to ignore. Benny buried himself in work, spending long nights in the studio. Meanwhile, rumors started swirling about his growing connection with Mona Norklit, a television worker he had met during an ABBA TV special. Everything fell apart in early 1981. One day, Benny came home and admitted to Frida that he had feelings for Mona. The news hit her hard. Though they tried to keep things professional for ABBA, the heartbreak was too much to ignore. After 9 years together, their relationship was over. In an open interview with Expressen, Benny's hands shook as he struggled to explain what went wrong. "Do we have to have that song? Because that was in the previous movie. Couldn't we take this one instead?" he recalled, referencing creative disagreements. He insisted they were still friends, but those close to them saw the pain beneath the words. For Frida, it wasn't just about losing a partner. It felt like a betrayal of everything they had built together, both in love and in music. The breakup left a mark on ABBA that couldn't be ignored. They kept making music, but something had changed. The spark wasn't the same. Both couples that once defined the band were now broken, and their songs started to reflect that pain. Tracks like The Winner Takes It All, and When All Is Said and Done hit differently for those who knew what was happening behind the scenes. While the world saw ABBA's golden couple falling apart, few knew the heartbreak they were going through. So when reporter Lars Johansson stepped into the Expressen office that May morning in 1981, he had no idea he was about to uncover a story that would forever change how fans saw the band. Inside the Expressen interview on May 20th, 1981, in a small office at Sweden's Expressen newspaper, Benny Andersson sat at a desk, nervously fidgeting with a pack of cigarettes. His usual air of confidence was nowhere to be found. His hands trembled, his eyes looked tired, and the weight of the past few weeks showed in every movement. For weeks, he had dodged the inevitable questions, but there was no escaping them now. The man who had once commanded stages with ease now sat uneasy, bracing himself for the conversation he had been dreading. He confessed that he had no idea how other people navigated moments like this. His voice was barely more than a whisper, each word weighed down by uncertainty. Smoke curled around him, creating a fragile barrier between himself and the uncomfortable truth he was finally speaking aloud. The man who had effortlessly crafted some of ABBA's most unforgettable hits now found himself at a loss for words when it came to his heartbreak. The newsroom hummed with anticipation. This wasn't just another celebrity interview. It was the first real glimpse into the unraveling of ABBA's most famous couple. For weeks, fans had speculated, and the tabloids had whispered, but now Benny was finally breaking his silence. As he spoke, his words carried the weight of a love story that had fallen apart faster than anyone expected. Across the desk, the reporter listened intently, too absorbed in the moment to notice the coffee beside him turning cold. When the topic of Mona came up, Benny tried to play it off casually, but his words didn't quite match the mood. He called her his new woman, attempting a laugh that felt anything but natural. The room fell into an uneasy silence as the weight of his confession settled in. No matter how much he tried to downplay it, everyone could see the tension behind his forced smile. The mood changed when Benny started talking about ABBA's future. For a moment, he dropped the band's polished image and spoke honestly. He admitted they weren't perfect, and that fame had its struggles. With a hint of exhaustion, he joked that he couldn't see himself still dancing around on stage with a beer belly at 45. That same week, Frida sat down for her interview, carrying herself with the quiet strength that had always defined her. She spoke with grace. "Yes, I'm very excited. You know, it would be wonderful to meet up with the fans again, because it actually doesn't happen that often." Refusing to dwell on bitterness or regret, she admitted that while the breakup had been painful, she had found comfort in someone new, a Swedish businessman whose name she chose to keep private. There was a mix of resilience and vulnerability in her words. She no longer saw marriage as something she needed, but love still mattered. Love, in whatever form it came, was still worth holding on to. The Expressen article was a turning point for ABBA. It peeled back the polished image, revealing that even music icons faced heartbreak and struggles. The band kept making music for another year and a half, but something had shifted. The spark that once defined them was now tinged with a sadness that even their most upbeat songs couldn't mask. Behind ABBA's dazzling success was a story most people never heard, one that defined one of its brightest stars. How did a young girl, once treated as an outsider in her own country, rise to become one of pop music's most beloved voices? A war child's journey to pop royalty. In the final months of 1945, as the world celebrated the end of World War II, a baby girl entered the world in a quiet Norwegian town. Her name was Frid Lyngstad, but years later, the world would simply know her as Frida. Instead of being greeted with warmth and celebration, her birth carried a shadow. She was not just another child, she was a war baby, born to a Norwegian mother and a German soldier in a country still healing from the scars of war. That lineage made her an outcast before she could even take her first steps. Frida's mother, Sinni Lyngstad, had fallen in love with Alfred Hasse, a German soldier stationed in Norway during the war. What started as a romance soon became a heavy burden. When the war ended, the country was desperate to rebuild, and anyone associated with the enemy faced brutal backlash. Norwegian women who had relationships with German soldiers were shunned, labeled as traitors, and treated with open hostility. Their children, innocent yet unwanted, bore the weight of that hatred. For Frida and her mother, life in post-war Norway was anything but easy. As a little girl, Frida grew up believing that her father had died in the war. It was the story her family told her, a way to protect her from a truth that was far more complicated. Hoping to leave the pain and stigma behind, her mother Sinni made the heartbreaking decision to leave Norway. With nothing but hope for a better future, she and Frida crossed the border into Sweden, eventually settling in the small industrial town of Torshälla. Life wasn't easy, but Sinni was determined to provide for her daughter. She worked long hours as a seamstress, stitching clothes by day and tucking Frida into bed at night, doing everything she could to build a life where her daughter would feel safe and loved. For young Frida, music wasn't just a hobby, it was a refuge. In a world where she often felt like an outsider, singing gave her a sense of belonging. By the time she was 11, she was already stepping onto small stages at local events, her voice carrying a depth and emotion far beyond her years. The townspeople took notice, but no one was prouder than her grandmother. While Sinni worked long hours to support them, it was Frida's grandmother who nurtured her love for music. She scraped together what little she had to buy Frida her first record player, along with a few treasured vinyl records. With every spin of the turntable, Frida lost herself in the melody, dreaming of a life far bigger than the quiet town of Torshälla. Frida once shared in a 1975 Swedish radio interview that music was her escape. She explained that when she sang, everything else faded away. No one questioned her past or where she came from. All that mattered was the music. For a girl who had grown up feeling like an outsider, those moments on stage gave her a rare sense of acceptance. The spotlight didn't judge, it simply shone, allowing her voice to tell a story far bigger than the one written by her circumstances. By the time she was 13, Frida wasn't just dreaming about music, she was making it happen. She put together her band, the Anifrid Four, and spent her early teens performing wherever she could. By 16, she was touring Sweden with a big band, singing jazz numbers in packed dance halls. Her deep, soulful voice stood out, and it wasn't long before industry professionals started to take notice. In 1967, EMI Records gave her a chance to step into the spotlight on her own, releasing her very first single. It was the beginning of something much bigger than she ever imagined. In the early 1970s, just as ABBA was starting to come together, a long-buried truth about Frida's father resurfaced. A German magazine had tracked down Alfred Hasse, the man she had been told was dead, only to discover he was very much alive and living in Germany. Frida was faced with the possibility of meeting him. In 1977, a reunion was arranged, but it wasn't the heartwarming moment one might expect. Instead, it was filled with uncomfortable silences, awkward glances, and so many questions that remained unanswered. It was a meeting that left Frida grappling with emotions she wasn't sure how to process. Later, Kay recalled how their first meeting felt like two strangers trying to reconnect after 3 decades apart. Despite their attempts to bridge the gap, the emotional distance between them was too vast to overcome. The father she had spent years wondering about was now in front of her. The real-life story of ABBA singer Anifrid Lyngstad is also one of searching for her father, only to find that the singer's birth was actually part of a grand Nazi scheme, but the connection she had hoped for just wasn't there. The girl, once rejected by her own country for her roots, went on to become a global icon, her voice reaching millions of fans worldwide. From being a war child to a pop sensation, Frida had overcome so much of her past, but fame had a way of throwing curveballs. When she swapped her pop star status for a real tiara, the question remained, would she finally find the happiness she'd been searching for all those years? The crown's heavyweight, after ABBA disbanded and Frida's marriage to Benny came to an end, it seemed like Frida Lyngstad was about to live out her real-life fairy tale. In 1992, she married Prince Heinrich Rutzo-Roos von Plauen, and just like that, she became a princess. The Swedish press went wild. Their beloved ABBA star, who had captured the world's heart as a pop icon, was now royalty, living in a grand Swiss castle that overlooked the serene beauty of Lake Geneva. It was like something out of a dream, and the world couldn't stop talking about it. But life in the palace wasn't quite the fairy tale everyone expected. The free-spirited woman who once lit up stages in glittering jumpsuits now found herself tangled in a web of strict royal protocols. Every public appearance, every word she spoke, had to align with centuries-old traditions and etiquette that felt worlds apart from her former life. The freedom she once had as a pop star was replaced by a constant pressure to conform to rules that didn't come naturally to her, leaving her to question if this royal life was truly what she had dreamed of. Frida once explained in a 1993 interview with a Swiss newspaper that the structure of aristocratic life was completely different from anything she had ever known. Her new reality was filled with complicated titles, formal dinners, and endless social obligations that seemed like a world away from the stage lights she was used to. Prince Heinrich's social circle was nothing like the world Frida had come from. Gone were the recording studios and concert venues where she thrived. Instead, her days were now filled with charity galas, diplomatic functions, and formal events. While Heinrich was well respected in royal circles, he had certain expectations for his wife, and they didn't leave much room for the creative freedom she had once known with ABBA. The lively energy she had enjoyed on stage, where she could express herself through music and performance, now seemed worlds away. Frida, once free to follow her passion, found herself adjusting to a more constrained role in the royal family, one that didn't allow her to be the same artist she once was. But nothing could have prepared Frida for the heartbreak that came in 1998. Her world came crashing down when her daughter, Annalisa L., tragically lost her life in a car accident in New York. And who was only 30, wasn't just her daughter. She was Frida's closest confidant, the person who had always been there for her and who truly understood the ups and downs of her extraordinary life, and knew what it was like to witness her mother's transformation from a war child to a pop sensation and eventually a princess. Their bond had been deep and unshakable, making the loss all the more devastating. Frida was left with an overwhelming sense of emptiness that no amount of fame or royal titles could ever fill. The loss of an hit Frida harder than anyone could imagine. She withdrew from the public eye, spending most of her time in the quiet solitude of her Swiss home. The glamorous world that once surrounded her, from royal events to her former pop star life, felt distant and unimportant. Even her royal duties, which once demanded her attention, seemed trivial compared to the immense grief she carried. During this incredibly tough time, Frida found an unexpected source of comfort in someone she never thought she would turn to, Benny Andersson. Despite the years of tension and their complicated past, Benny reached out to her. He understood the unique pressure of living in the spotlight, a pressure they both knew all too well. Their shared history in ABBA provided Frida with a connection she couldn't find in her royal life. It wasn't the same as the public adoration or the grandeur of her life as a princess, but in those quiet moments, it was exactly what she needed. By early 2000, Frida had largely faded from the public eye. She'd become a rare presence in the world that had once adored her. The woman who had faced wartime rejection, conquered the music world, and married into royalty had found solace in privacy. She made occasional appearances at ABBA-related events, but for the most part, she stayed in her peaceful Swiss sanctuary, away from the cameras and the world's expectations. While Frida may have stepped away from the spotlight, ABBA's legacy continues to shine brightly. What if you could experience the magic of ABBA in a way you never imagined? A new era of music and technology. ABBA's journey over the years has been nothing short of amazing. From their rise to stardom in the 70s to becoming a lasting influence on music and pop culture, the group has left a powerful legacy. Even though they parted ways in 1982, in 1974, when a Swedish band performed at the Eurovision Song Contest, all in the public eye, and they finally split in 1982, their music has continued to connect with fans across generations. But in 2021, ABBA proved that its legacy was about looking ahead. That year, ABBA released Voyage, their first new album in 40 years. It was a huge deal for both their fans and the music world. The album received praise, reminding everyone of ABBA's timeless sound. But what made ABBA's return stand out wasn't just the music, it was the way they shared it. They introduced a whole new kind of concert experience with ABBA Voyage, a residency in London where their digital avatars, or avatars, performed alongside a live band. The technology behind it took 7 years and $175 million to develop using motion capture and special effects to make their avatars look like their younger selves. This concert is unlike anything people have ever seen. The avatars of Benny, Bjorn, Agnetha, and Frida are so lifelike it is hard to believe they're not standing right there in front of you. The band spent a month in motion capture suits to make sure their performances felt as real as possible. The result is a groundbreaking show that blends the real and digital worlds. Most amazingly, since opening in May 2022, ABBA Voyage has sold over 1.3 million tickets and become a global sensation. Fans from over 140 countries have traveled thousands of miles to be part of this new chapter in ABBA history. For many, the concert has been an emotional journey, bringing back memories of their youth and reconnecting them to the magic of ABBA's classic hits. The band made a surprise appearance during the first anniversary in 2023, waving to the crowd as their avatars performed on stage, creating an unforgettable moment. The concert took place in a specially designed arena near Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in London, built to create the best experience possible for the audience. Everyone felt a connection with the music, enhanced by cutting-edge technology, yet still full of the raw emotion of a live performance. With a 10-piece live band, incredible visual effects, and a team of up to 200 people, every detail of the show comes together to make it an experience you'll never forget. The avatars don't just perform the old hits, they bring them to life in a fresh, exciting way. Each performance feels unique because it is shaped by the energy of the audience and the atmosphere of the venue. People of all ages, from lifelong ABBA fans to younger generations discovering their music for the first time, are coming together to celebrate the band's legacy in a brand new way. Despite the overwhelming success of ABBA Voyage, the band has made it clear that traditional live performances are not in their plans. They even turned down a reported $1 billion offer for a world tour. Although their avatars will not perform outside the ABBA Voyage arena, the experience they provide continues to push the boundaries of live music in a truly groundbreaking way. How do you think fame shaped the dynamics of Benny and Frida's relationship? What do you think could have been done differently to save their love story and ABBA's original magic? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.